So zero to hero, momentum makers, momentum creators. Let's go.
If you think AXMED sounds like a new DJ in Berlin or a Scandinavian skincare brand, think again. It's actually one of the most exciting startups out there. And no, it doesn't exfoliate, but it is shaking things in a major way. Today, we're joined by the powerhouse behind it all, co founder Sofia Radley. She's the kind of founder who probably has three backup plans, two pitch decks, and one very chill demeanor while the rest of us are crying over Google Slides. So buckle up. We are diving into the world of AXMED where innovation meets. Why didn't we think of that? Welcome, Sophia. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Lara, for the kind words and the introduction. Great to be here with you and Erika today.
Thank you so much, Sophia. We know that you have a lot going on, to say at the very least. So we really appreciate your time with us here. Sophia is the COO of the company at the moment, but she also is a very busy mom. So we really appreciate her time here with us today. So let's rewind to before AXMED. What were you doing, Sophia, and what were you dreaming about at the time?
Oh, gosh, it seems like another life, at this point. But I've been a pharmacist, and that's where I've dedicated my career until AXMED. I was working in the pharmaceutical sector. I think before that, there were a couple of experiences that are really relevant to the conversation today, which is the time I was able to work as a pharmacist in different markets, such as Guatemala, El Salvador, India. I think also seeing, being able to see how different healthcare systems worked in those markets, and then joining the pharmaceutical sector. And I worked for GSK for 7 years there in different commercial roles. And it allowed me also to work with different markets. So also see how different countries and teams worked on access to medicines and launch. And that's actually a common experience I have with my co-founders, which I can talk a little bit about later. But I think if you couple those things together, it just powered a lot of insights around how can we do things differently around access to medicines. I cannot say I was dreaming, from a very young age on how to improve access to medicines precisely, but I always had a desire to work in health. My mom has multiple sclerosis, and as a young girl, I had an experience very early on. When we were traveling, she forgot her medication, and she couldn't get her medication at the time where we were going in Central America. And I remember this, kind of must have been like younger than 12 years old, and thinking, why on earth is this a problem, right? Like, how on earth can you not find this medication wherever we're going? And I think that stuck with me. Plus, seeing my mother being able to thrive in life thanks to the medication she was fortunate to get because of the country we lived in and the access we had, I think always started to shape that I wanted to devote my life to healthcare. And I think if you connect all the dots over time, it just made sense that, trying to disrupt access to medicines in a new way is the right place to be right now. So that's a little bit of what brought me all the way to starting AXMED before now.
Were you always trying to innovate this specific industry, this specific sector, or did you have any other ideas before? It's inspiring the story that you told us, right? That you had a personal involvement with this sector, let's say. So were you always very kind of like stubborn on trying to get a solution within this segment, or did you try to find the pain point in any industry and then this idea came up?
I think that's a great question, because I think I've seen co-founders and founders on both sides, right? I think there's this natural entrepreneur that I talk about. I'm not one of those. So those people that no matter what they do, they know they're going to, they're always looking for problems and how to address them and solve them. And they are industry agnostic, perhaps, because they're just looking for opportunities on how to solve a problem through business. I was more on the side of, I care deeply about this problem, and it didn't necessarily mean disrupting or innovating. I don't think I'm an entrepreneur by nature. It's just that to solve the problem I fell in love with, we needed to create something new because no one had done it before. If you think about the first steps I took during pharmacy school was I started first as a researcher. So I think my approach to how do I solve this problem was let's join forces with those who are trying to push the boundaries of science, find the next medication. And I learned quickly that's not the place I wanted to be, or maybe the place where I would make the best use of my skills. And that's when I pivoted then to the industry. So the industry being another way I thought I could serve more patients at scale by making those medicines accessible to more markets. So I've been looking for ways to solve or contribute to improving health in different markets and in different places of the world. But I don't think I've had that obsession that I've seen with other founders of that drive to disrupt and innovate. I think it's been more a means to an end of, look, there's no solution for this. Someone has to do it. And, with my co-founders, we were the ones to do it first. And as a result, you find yourself being an entrepreneur. But I don't think that was the plan until it had to be.
Okay, and Sophia, you mentioned earlier about your co-founders, right? So we know that there is a huge difference between being a solo founder and having a co-founder. So the journey challenges are completely different. So we would like to know a little bit more about your experience. How was everything since the beginning?
I mean, this could be just a full podcast. I think it's one of the most important decisions that anyone who either wants to be a founder and that has that drive, that innate drive, or wants to solve a problem, and the only way to solve that problem is through entrepreneurship, needs to think through very carefully. It's one of the major reasons why startups fail. After having done this for a few years, I can certainly understand why. I think for me, it starts with self-awareness and really knowing who you are and what makes you kick and what makes you thrive, right? And I think there's two types of people. You either have what it takes to be a solo founder, and that means giving up on many things, but also certain benefits, right? But you need to know inside yourself whether that's what you're fit for. Or as I am, and I think I still, after these years of experience, I would still make the same decision. Or you are a co-founder, someone who needs the benefits that come from having others around you when solving a problem that's so challenging. And, entrepreneurship, it's one of the most exhausting processes in life. So I've seen people thriving. I don't think there's a right answer. I read a lot about, co-founding is better, founding solo, it's better. Look, I think it really depends on who you are as an individual. What are your skills? In my experience, co-founding has certain benefits. First, you have others providing you energy when the moments are tough or hard. You complement your skills beautifully. And I think together also you can iterate more, bounce ideas off more, and you end up in a stronger place than you would have otherwise alone. And you can pull from each other when tough are moments, but also move faster through those moments, right? If I think that any of us, Emmanuel, Felix, or myself, would have had to build this company alone, I don't know if we would have been able to do it this fast, right? Because we were three. So we divided the tasks among the team. For me, those benefits, just being together in it, being as a team, going not alone, but together, maybe a little bit, with certain pain points at some points, but that certainly compensates for the challenges that having co-founders brings, of course, because there's certainly issues and tensions that will arise when someone's building something from scratch and you have to do it with others. For me, I think it's a very personal balance and decision that I encourage everyone to think very carefully about before deciding what route they want to take, because it's a route that you cannot come back from easily, right? If you started something fully on your own, it's really hard to bring someone as an equal later down the line. If you've started someone with others, you're in it with others, right? It's not like you can say, well, bye now, I want to be here by myself.
Yes, you cannot fire the co-founder, right? How can
Exactly.
you do that? It's impossible. But at
Exactly.
the same time, they say two or more heads are better than one, right? So you probably have also the opportunity to share your own ideas, your vision, and to receive the feedback, which sometimes, we might think something is amazing and, because created by us. So for sure it will be successful, and the other person can still show you the other perspective, the one that they see. I was curious to understand, because the other two co-founders are both I think they are both males, right? So have you felt like being a female uh, because of your particular story? You are a mom, so you have a lot of things going on. Of course, like was mentioned earlier, have you felt like support from their side, like knowing that you have your family, you have some particular tasks that you cannot delegate, right? Or you felt the opposite, like you felt that they were I don't know, trying to move forward without you.
Yeah, I think I can only say that it's only because I've had them doing this journey and they've had me, I think, and we've been in it together as a team that I've been able to do this and the motherhood and the mom side of things, right? Which is another factor if you want to, if you want to take a week off or you need a week off, just having other people who care so deeply about the business, who can step in, who can take charge, who can, support each other during those times, I think it's critical. So I think it's another important element when you're deciding, do I want to be in this together or can I do it alone? For me, it's only been for the positive side. It's true also that they are also fathers of kids under 3 and 4 years old. So I think we all were in this together and we all understand what it means. Of course, the motherhood, they don't go through pregnancy, they don't have to breastfeed. It's a very different role that nature puts on either of us, men and women. But I think because they were going through it too, they understood. For me, it's been just all positive things, thankfully, because it does come with a lot of moments of trading and trying to balance it out and having others just, yeah, change the whole story.
Well, let's say that they, like in general, men can have it just slightly a little bit easier most of the time. But like you created your company, and I think that afterwards you decided to start a family. You had your first kids. So how did that go? How did you manage to balance the pressure of being a co-founder and the COO of the company, and also wanting to satisfy the other sphere of your personal life, let's say? How did you manage to do that?
It was actually the other way around. So I think some women might have the luxury of deciding or planning, like, when do I become a mother if I'm already a founder and finding for the right time. I was already a mom when I moved to Harvard Business School and I met Emmanuel, one of my co-founders. So I was kind of already in it. There was no way out. A baby was already there in my life. I got pregnant of my second kid literally when we were just building, pitching, and starting to raise. And I gave birth to my second kid the week that the first 5 employees joined because we had just raised like the month before my due date. So
Wow.
I think that's the part that I could have chosen to do a little bit different. If I've learned something about motherhood and now I'm expecting my third one, which, will bring its own challenges and adventures, I'm sure. But if I've learned something about motherhood is that there's never a right time, never a right time. So if you want to be a mom and you also care deeply and passionately about a problem and your business and your startup, you can wait for years and it will never be, look, now I have everything, now everything's stable. I don't think there's that time in a business when it's your own business. You always care so much about it, and there's, especially in the early years, there's always so many challenges coming up and things that never have been done, that my approach to it was, let's just get on with it. I wanted to be a young mom and whatever will come, will come. I think so far it's been of course, a challenging journey, but a rewarding one. But I wouldn't change it in hindsight. I wouldn't have delayed either the business, because sometimes opportunities come when they come, right? And I met my co-founders and everything clicked and aligned when it did. And I also wanted a young family. So none of those two could have waited without giving up something that I deeply cared about. So sometimes you don't get the luxury of planning ahead or knowing all this in advance.
Well, Sophia, I have to say you make it sound so easy. You're explaining it with such grace and I don't know, like so calmly that you make it sound very easily. I am 4 months, almost 5 months postpartum, and I started working like after three and a half, 4 months. And I felt like a badass coming, going back to work and making it work. If I think of you starting going through the fundraising and hiring your first 5 employees and getting the business going while you were just like you were giving birth. To me, it's honestly mind blowing. But I'm like, how did you manage to do that? But huge congrats for sure. I mean, it is really really hard, and it takes a lot of passion for sure, without any doubt.
Yeah.
But
Thank
you
you. I
also
will say
mentioned
something,
that,
Erika. The
yeah,
second kid is
yeah,
easier than the first. At least that was my experience. So maybe I was lucky. Let's see
really.
about the third. We can talk in a few months, and then maybe I say I stand corrected. But that was, yeah, I think that was my experience. The first one, I was in a similar place to you, Erika. I took my time, and it was a whole process of adjusting to a new reality and your new self as a mother, and balancing that with work. Second time around, everything felt, I've done this, I know what I'm doing, and I can afford to spend less time worrying about details that I think you worry more with your first one. So hopefully it's the same for you too if the time comes.
Been there, done that. Okay, let's see. I don't know. I cannot
Yeah.
think of being easier, but like, yes, I trust you and I hope so. But yeah, but you also mentioned that you managed to, like, you met your first co-founder, and you guys kind of like complemented each other in terms of skills. Can you explain a little bit more about what skills do you think you were missing at the time, and how did your co-founder help you, and why did you choose to add a third co-founder to the group?
Yes. So I think first on how we came together, Emmanuel, one, I think we all connected first on the problem we fell in love with, and we had all experienced it in different ways in the careers we've had in the industry. We also all aligned in our first conversations on how the solution could look like, right? And I think certain elements around, look, this has to be a business oriented solution, addressing a market failure dynamic that we had all experienced was preventing proper access to medicines. Tech has a major role to play here to drive unparalleled efficiency and unlock incredible economies of scale, and a win-win solution for procurers of medicines in low and middle income countries and manufacturers of medicines. So I think it all started just as conversations around the problem we deeply cared about, how this could be solved. Emmanuel had started Harvard a bit earlier than I have, and was already working and building something along those lines with Felix, who he knew from his time at Novartis. So they were longtime colleagues and friends from their last company. And when I met Emmanuel, we kind of, joined forces. And to be honest, now that I look back at it, there wasn't really a lot of thought into, and it is going to work, is it not? We were just so convinced that someone had to do something about this, and that no one had tried bringing technology and digital innovation to this space, and that it could really solve a long neglected issue. That I think that drive and that passion just kept us going, even when we got a lot of no's. But I think that the click between the three of us, and that's why I say for us, we didn't have the luxury or the time or the privilege to think through, do I want to co-found? I think Emmanuel had a little bit of that time, and he realized, I want others with me on this journey. I don't want to do it alone. But sometimes that connection through people is what actually thrives or sparks the business initially, right? So I think for us, probably without the three of us really, driving each other, pulling from each other when we needed it most, we wouldn't have built or moved at the space and pace we did, and committed as quickly as we did to this, because we all quit our jobs and fully dedicated to these when the risks and the stakes were very high. So I think that was a little bit how the three of us ended up together, and why three and not one or two or four. On the skill side, in hindsight especially, I realized that, as I said in the beginning, I didn't want to be, or I wasn't meant to be, or born to be an entrepreneur. I don't have that, which I think Emmanuel, for example, has a lot of, that kind of entrepreneurial thrive and vision, right? Where no one has gone there and you just instantly want to go there and do that. That has never been done. We all have very different skills in our backgrounds. Emmanuel comes from the banking world. Felix was a consultant, and I was a pharmacist. So I think even as our technical backgrounds complemented each other really well for the solution we were trying to build, and our experiences did so too. But then even on how do we get this done, there was like a strong vision and that entrepreneurial spirit coming from money. I really love executing and like building things. And once I know the vision, how do we get from here to there? Right. So I think having those different mix of skills, Felix is extremely analytic, and it was able, especially earlier on, to really bring all the insights that we needed to make the right decisions. Of course, as a consultant, to rationalize and build everything with a strong argument around it. I think we really saw that benefit from the very beginning because we could complement and piggyback on each other's personalities. And now, as we grow and scale and we're building the business, we kind of start seeing more of those skills merging into each other because it's contagious, right? And you learn from each other a lot. It's a journey that I'm grateful for.
And as Pia, we often hear this from co-founders that having a different skill set helps because one person knows how to do one thing, the other one knows how to do something else. And so you actually become really complementary to each other. And this is kind of like a secret to success, right? If we can call it this way. So you mentioned Harvard, right? Harvard is the most famous university in the world, I would say. How would you say Harvard play a role in this startup, if did? And I don't know, maybe it helped you with the investors, or for example, it helped you in some other ways that you can explain to us.
Great question too. I think the answer is a little bit bittersweet because I think something that we used to say a lot at Harvard, talent is more equally distributed than opportunity, right, around the world, which means there are a lot of talented people everywhere with great ideas, with a passion, drive, and desire to solve the problems, like, for example, that we're working on right now, right, access to medicines and the inequality around it. But I think opportunity is less distributed, which means you have to be at the right place at the right time to be able to enact those desires and passions to solve that problem and have the means to solve it. And I think I have to answer honestly to this question. I don't think we would have been able to solve or build a solution for this problem as quickly and as efficiently as we did hadn't we been connected or in the world or in the realm of Harvard Business School, Harvard graduate schools more broadly, where Emmanuel was too. First, because of network, of course. I think the credibility that brings also helps tremendously when you're racing, when you're talking to stakeholders and investors. I think this is true also between the American world and the European world. And I think that's why we also see greater opportunity in the US for founders and startups than in Europe, because the ticket size are so different, right? When you're in one world or the other. And I always say that the ticket size determines the size of the problem you can solve. So if you're trying to clean the oceans around the world, you need a hell of a lot of millions to do that. If you're trying to address climate change or solve poverty or improve access to medicines, you're not going to do that with a $500,000 seed round, which is, maybe a really good seed round in Europe, or 1 million. I think you need the ticket size that American investors are willing to put behind solutions. We saw that with AI, right? And how an American company, I won't name names, but comes in and acquires a European company and then just throws money at it, and it accelerates tremendously a solution that otherwise maybe would have taken 5-10 more years to get where we are if it had stayed in under European pocket. So as a European, it's something that I wish we can do more of, and I think we're all here in that same boat. But I think both because of the Harvard brand, the network, and the credibility that it builds, but also the access to American investors and stakeholders, it would have been a very different story hadn't we been in that right time at the right place. Have we, would we get there eventually? Yes. More slowly, less competitively, less efficiently? Probably.
And what do you think is the main difference for the startup world comparing Europe to the US? Is it the fear of investing? Is it because if the investors don't know in which companies to invest, so there is a lack of information somewhere, or maybe the lack of funds, so maybe the investors do not have enough money? How do you see it? What is your point of view?
So there are many factors, but I think if I have to highlight a few, one, I think the risk profit assessment, that risk balance that every investor has to do. follows a very different framework in Europe than in the US, based on patterns, on years of experience, on appetite for risk, on cost of capital, on diversification and opportunity, right? I think it's hard to negate that there are just startups everywhere, every day in the US. So the pool you're pulling from when you're trying to pick good startups, it's way broader and therefore way more diverse and spread in the US than in Europe. I think that that's one. The other one is, I mean, I say we run a startup, but it's actually a multinational because we have now 4 legal entities. So it's really like running a multinational company. One is in the US, another one is in Europe. The difference in ease of doing business has also been significant, right? I think the US, it's everything's geared up to, do you have an idea? Just get started. From banking solutions, from hiring, from HR, super cheap, affordable solutions that you can scale up as your business scales. It's just startup land. This is like Disneyland for founders. You go to Europe and then you're like, maybe one single provider will accept, like will open you a bank account, right? If you're no one. And if you have a startup and you have nothing to prove. So I think the ease of doing business for a founder and the speed at which they can do this, it's also a little bit different. And finally, I think regulation, especially if you're trying to disrupt an industry like ours, where it's very regulated, people who are in very highly technical industries also, the European Union is way more regulated in terms of licenses you need to operate and how do you scale and grow. So there's some of the things I would highlight, but I'm sure there are many more other reasons that I haven't experienced yet that I will encounter as we grow.
Because if I'm not wrong, the company has both kind of investors from US and from Europe, so you know the differences between them pretty well. Do you also think that that will make an impact on the future direction of the company? In a sense that, do you think that they can actually influence the expansion of the company in US versus Europe?
So I think because the nature of our investors in the US and Europe is super different, not just geographically, but there's a bigger layer of difference that is determining that the direction they each want to follow. On the US, we have the Gates Foundation. So they're really interested in that impact mission and non-profit charitable work that the company does, right? Because we're addressing access to medicines and making it more affordable at higher quality for patients in low and middle income countries. I think in Europe, we have a traditional VC that's not a foundation or a philanthropic source. So I think that's for me, more than the geographical difference, the difference in the styles and the needs that we have on our cap table, which I think is something that a lot of social entrepreneurs have to navigate when they have what I call hybrid cap tables, because they have investors that care about very different things and objectives and outcomes, which can be a really good thing, I think, and very powerful to influence the right decision across both sides of the spectrum, right? Mission and margin on the other side. Having said that, this year we're starting our Series A fundraising. I think that's when we've been lucky now to keep the cap table to just a handful of investors, and that keeps things simple. The investors we have on the European side are just fantastic, very supportive, and really aligned with what the business is doing. I think once you start opening, and the more series you go through, the more investors you have, the more crowded your cap table becomes. I think that's when we will start seeing the stark differences that maybe geographical location of the investor or interest brings to the decisions of the business. We'll also try to make the best decision as founders. I think that's the other major mistake that founders can make, is rushing to get investors through the door without really thinking through, is this the right type of investor? Sometimes you cannot afford that decision because all you need is the capital, and I totally understand it. But I think, Erika, a lot of the scenarios you've described are mitigated by really taking the time and the resources to do due diligence on your investors too, right? The same way they do it on you.
That's true. That's crucial also to make sure that the investor missions matches perfectly the one that the company has, which is at the end of the day probably the most important thing to make it work as a partnership.
So I wanted to jump a little bit on this question to ask you if basically you're saying the investors do not really have the power to influence your company, which is I think it's a very good thing, right? So what is your vision for the future for AXMED? So how do you see the company, I don't know, let's say in 5 or 10 years?
And really, I would just take the opportunity to also add that AXMED is basically is a business that it might outlive you, as you also mentioned before during our previous conversation. So how do you stay motivated when results aren't that like always immediate? How do you keep yourself motivated?
Yeah. I mean, two great questions. First, Lara, the next 5 years, and let me start by caveating, ask me again in a year, because if something is true about startups is that, I mean, if you're fast enough to capitalize on opportunities, the plan should change so fast that, almost even having a written plan is useless because you're literally growing and scaling. And it's still good to have a plan. I think it provides a little bit of structure, but it should change fast enough for that plan to become irrelevant quickly enough. So certainly we've seen that in the last 3 years of the business growing, where you have an idea where to start from, and then you just, if you stay attentive, there are just so many more opportunities ancillary to your initial thesis or solution that you just have to have the hunger to jump onto them. So if I think about the next 5 years, I think we become the marketplace for procurers in low and middle income countries to find the medicines. Think about, you going to Amazon and buying a book. This is what we do for procurers in low and middle income countries. They should find everything in one click. We aggregate demand at an unprecedented level, and we connect them with suppliers so that through economies of scale, suppliers can win because they reduce patient acquisition costs. They have an easier time accessing these markets, which are sometimes hard to crack. And then for procurers, through that demand aggregation, they increase the purchasing power, because now it's not just me, a little hospital in a country somewhere in the middle of South America or Africa negotiating to get an antibiotic. Now it's all digital through economies of scale, and I'm negotiating with higher volumes, or someone's negotiating on my behalf. So in 5 years, we want to be the marketplace for that. Currently, the market is very fragmented, meaning every country is trying to do the best to get the medicines the best way they can, digital or single technical platform to do this. So I think in 5 years we'll be there. We're seeing certainly the traction and the speed of the business getting us there in 5 years, which is an ambitious target. I think that's going to be the case. There are other things that we've realized, that the health system, and I think when you're a social entrepreneur, it's very important to be a system thinker, so that you start with a thesis of, this is the lever I can work around to solve the problem. You cannot do it all. You have to collaborate, and there's others in the system with you, but you can certainly start somewhere, but be ready to move through the system and find, okay, what are the other parts of the value chain that might hinder the outcomes or the mission or the impact of our business. And I think we've seen certainly many opportunities arising on that front in other parts of the system, such as logistics being an area that could do with a lot of disruption and efficiency and improvement. So now we've gone into logistics as SaaS services. We've seen that also on advisory and analytics and data, and the lack of this data, what that costs for manufacturers and suppliers to make proper decisions as to how to go into these markets and make that access more sustainable, commercially speaking. So now we've also gone into that. So I think those will be two areas that we'll see growing a lot in the next 5 years, Vlada, to complement the digital solution of the marketplace itself. And now, the life question, I think it's a reflection that I've shared with a lot of social entrepreneurs, which is a very distinct element between, I don't want to call them traditional entrepreneurs, but let's just say you're building a brand of cosmetics or the next social media platform. Your business will outlive you, hopefully, if it's successful, for sure. But the approach is a little bit different, in the sense that as a social entrepreneur, when you're trying to solve a problem that crosses across generations and countries, and it's a global challenge that it's going to take probably hundreds of years to solve fully, you have to have a very different approach, because you know that despite all your work and efforts, you'll be long gone from this world, and others will still need to be working at it to get to the place you want to get, right? So I wish I could say, in 20 years, Lara, we're going to have solved access to medicines for every single human in the world. That's not true, right? I think if you're building a cosmetic brand, you can say, look, in 20 years, we're going to make every woman have beautiful lips with our new lipstick. I think that's more achievable than trying to solve climate change or pollution, right, in one single generation. So I think that's the beautiful part of a social entrepreneur, because you know that you're working really hard, but you're not going to solve the problem by yourself. That is going to take many more after you to keep building over what you built. But I think the other side of how beautiful that is that you need to find other ways to stay really engaged with it. Because sometimes, your point, Erika, it can feel like, well, what's the point of this if the problem is still going to be there when I leave this world, right? So it's a double-edged sword that social entrepreneurs have to manage very carefully. And by the way, another reason why I think if you're trying to solve such big problems, having co-founders really helps, because those are the moments where you pull from each other when you need it most.
And as you said, you're solving a problem that affects millions, right? But not all of them are paying customers. So how do you make the business model work and without compromising the mission of the business?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, if I think about the patients, like the millions of patients our solution aims to serve and whose lives aims to improve, none of them are going to ever be paying customers, right? This is not a platform. It's not a B2C platform. It's a B2B, meaning we connect businesses, and those are the ones procuring medicines on behalf of the countries, their hospitals, their businesses, whatever, depending on the nature of the procurer. So there's that intermediate layer of who are we dealing with and who do we need to work with to solve access to medicines, because those are the institutions serving patients, right? And at the end of the day, it's all about saving lives and improving patients' lives.
You ever had a case where companies where you were working with, they were not able to pay you, or like to like meet the economic effort that that was negotiated during the first transaction, for example? Or did you ever had a problem with companies that might be like in, because I can imagine that if the companies, like for example institutions that are in Africa or more like in like different difficult markets, let's say, can have problem, right? So did you have any case like that, and how did you manage it?
And that's a major economic risk of this industry, and why also many have stayed away from trying to solve this problem, because you have difficulties of repayment from these markets and these customers. You have FX volatility, meaning, these markets mostly
Hi.
operating currencies that
Yeah,
the next day are going to be worth, 10% less. And therefore, for them, it's 10% more costly to buy what they said they would buy a month ago.
exactly.
That's exactly. So I think that's an area that when you're building a solution for this industry, you have to think about it every day, but also accommodate for that in the business solution. That's something because we had the experience, we really try to do earlier on. And I think that's what's helped us mitigate those scenarios. So we haven't had any situation where a customer couldn't pay back. We've had scenarios where the payment terms had to be made really flexible to meet, like, understanding how these customers' cash cycles work, FX volatility works, and what they are exposed to in the markets to really meet them where they are and make the solution work, right? Because it's all about unlocking access, and unlocking access is not only about, okay, we have the right medicine at the right price, but also how do we get those medicines to your hands, which includes the payment, the financing, and the cash flow to really make sure they can get the medicines when they need them, regardless of liquidity constraints. So I think because we knew the system and we had experience with this, we really thought very upfront, Erika, about taking that piece into consideration. I'm sure we will have some of these situations. I think that comes back to your question, Erika, on mission versus margin, right? You're a business, you need to sustain yourself, but sometimes how much profit do you sacrifice to still deliver your mission? And that's a decision we're making also already every day on different fronts, right? On the prices we set, on the margins we set, on the promises we made to make, for example, the platform free to use to any procuring in a low middle income country, right? That has a massive cost because then we need to find other ways to cross subsidize the platform. I think that's where you can also be very creative as a business owner and say, if this is the mission, how do we sustain the mission through other revenue streams? And how do we mitigate the risk of lack of repayment through other revenue streams so that we never have to compromise on mission or not deliver medicines if it ever comes to that. So you also have to kind of diversify risk almost when you're operating in these markets.
Okay. So you're able to work with those kind of like more, I don't know how, like, let's say like particular countries leveraging on other streams plus leveraging on flexible pricing model, flexible contracts that you can put in place for them. Okay. Thank you.
Payment terms are a key piece here.
Yeah.
But yeah, especially like finding ways to cross subsidize these and being very aware of the financial risks and how do you mitigate for those. And this is true for many companies, right? Where you see an area of the business might not be the most profitable, but that's where they do research or where they do the mission and impact, and they cross subsidize that with other areas where it allows them to sustain the missions. I think that's what we balance very actively on an ongoing basis to really be able to your point, Erica, to balance that mission with the profit side of things.
Yeah. No, makes perfect sense. Thank you.
And so, Sophia, we understand like sometimes working B2B is not very easy, right? So there are probably a lot of difficulties, especially in the particular sector that you're operating in. I was just curious to understand, was there, if any, like a moment where actually, apart from difficulties of working with governments or other companies, was there a real moment where you said, okay, I quit? I don't want to do this anymore. I believed in this company, but it's not working out. And something like really important that was making you change your decision.
Yeah, I think first it's a great question because as founders and in the entrepreneurial world or anyone who's thinking like, should I go into entrepreneurship, but is it for me? I don't know. I think we have this like fake world where you think that a founder just does it and knows that they're going to do it from the very beginning and they have what it takes and they never hesitate and they never want to quit. And that's just so not true. At least for me, and I'll talk about my experience, but I've never had the reason for the one time I remember I was like, gosh, should I quit? You know, is there another world for me or another life that doesn't involve doing this? And it wasn't really because of business. And I think that's probably true for every founder. The reasons why you think of quitting, or even for those who quit or give up on their solution or the business or the dream, is normally not because of the business or technical reasons. It's normally more due to personal circumstances. And that could be, mental health and well-being and burnout, which is one of the key reasons why we see a lot of founders, especially solo founders, just saying, I can't do this anymore, I give up, or because of interpersonal dynamics, right? And I think for me, one of the toughest moments, I think the three of us, we're all so in love, and everyone who's joined us, by the way, because I think you start a business being 2 or 3 or whatever, but then none of this would have happened without the great team we brought on board, and they now have or deserve as much credit as any of us. But I think you bring people who are so passionate about the problem, and certainly that's true for the 3 co-founders. So I don't think we'll ever run out of passion for solving that problem or for the solution or exploring different solutions. I think for me, the hardest moment as a founder, and when I was closer to considering, is this for me? Should I just quit and get out of the way, was because of interpersonal dynamics and difficulties to work together as a team or communicate efficiently. And I always say this, but I think the hardest conversations I've had in life are first with my husband and then with my co-founders. And those have been some of the most difficult, heartbreaking conversations, but also most rewarding and the ones from which I've grown the most, right? So the same way, and I think if you're not having those conversations and having those real heartbreaking tensions, most likely you're not being honest to each other, right? The same way that a marriage that's always going really well and everything's perfect and everyone's aligned every single day of their lives, probably something's not there fully right. So I think you just learn by doing. And for me and for my co-founders, I'm sure we had some of the toughest and most intense conversations as individuals. And I think when there was a moment where we were all dealing with a lot, and when one of those conversations happened, that it was the first time I thought about it, and then I verbalized it to them. Look, I just, I don't know, like, should I get out of the way, right? Like, is this, and I think that's never because I doubted of the business, but more because of that interpersonal dynamic and really thinking through, is this the best for the business, and is this the best way to get there? And am I the right person here? Or, I'm sure they all had similar questions at some point. And that brings me to a very important point, other than acknowledging that it's going to be really tough and some of the hardest conversations are going to happen as you build a business, and you're going to get hurt, and you're going to hurt your co-founders the same way you hurt someone you deeply care about as you learn and as you grow. But for me, the other point that is really important is that I think we all realize that sometimes you get, as a founder, and I think this is true to everyone, you get into this zero-sum world where it's either this or I'm worth nothing after this, right? You get so committed and you pour yourself fully into a business that I remember thinking, okay, but if I quit, I have no life after this. Like, what am I worth for? Like, what can I do after this, right? You forget you had a life before, that you had a career, a successful career. You kind of start kind of doubting yourself, because you're like, well, now I'm AXMED, right? Like, I'm branded with my business. So if I quit, how on earth am I going to move on from this? And I think it was very refreshing for the three of us to give us grace and the space to say, look, we're all in this, but things could change at any time. A family member could get sick, right? Like, I think just being open to have that conversation and not have that I'm against the wall and it's either this or nothing was really powerful. And actually that brought a lot of richness into our relationship, but also how we build the business with less negative pressure, if you know what I mean. So with really hard conversations, yes, Lara, I've been in one moment of this journey close to wondering, am I the right person? Should I get out? And then lastly, I think most impactful and growthful moments have come from those conversations, and also how we've reshifted as a team.
It is really interesting, Sophia, because the way you described it, it actually has a lot of similarities to a romantic relationship, if you think about it, because you are managing a business together, but it's not like your work life at that point. Like, it becomes your whole life. It becomes yourself. As you said, your job is an extension of who you really are. It is a part,
It's your
internal
identity
part of you,
almost.
of your identity. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So it is interesting to notice that, like, the effect of, like, hey, this business is not going well. Am I worth enough? Am I the problem? Like, you start self-doubting yourself.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the dynamic.
Or the business is going fantastically well, Erika, which I think also happens and people don't talk a lot about it. I think we've been blessed in AXMED to see such a growth, and we sometimes have to pinch ourselves because we're like, is this real? Like,
Yeah.
how well is it going and how fast it's growing? But sometimes that brings new challenges, because you have to learn
Can I
to
keep
move
up with
from,
that?
who's best served to do what, and how do dynamics change across founders? Because I think you start co-founding or founding something and it's all a deck and it's all ideas and you're just like pitching, and it's all about who the founders are and can they solve, do they have what they take. All of a sudden you're running a company. You have 10, 20, 30 people in an organization that you need to care for and provide for, and who depend on you and trust on the idea you're building. And that changes. And then you need hierarchy across co-founders. Not everyone can just decide everything equally, first because of experience, skill, seniority, but also roles within the organization, right? So that it's a transition itself, that almost like in a marriage, you kind of, okay, what's my place? Who's best at what? Where do I yield space to the other one? Where do I not? Because I know it's not the right thing to do. So, Erika, yes, absolutely. I think it just becomes, when you're working for someone or for a company, you can care a lot about your work. I certainly cared a lot about, and probably you resonate with this too. I mean, I cared about my career and I wanted to be my best and do the best for the company I worked for. But it's not your identity. There's never that feeling of, if I leave this company, who am I? Right? Like, I'm sure some might go through that too when working for others, but I think that's just so true from moment zero, when your face and your life and your pitch is just so attached to AXMED. And almost it's easy to fall in the trap where the success of the company becomes a
Your
proxy
own
for your
success.
own success.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And also like as when you are in a couple and for a long time, the couple evolves. So you need to meet the new needs of the other person. That's the exact same with the business. You are a founder, but then all of a sudden you are the CEO or the COO of a 100 employees company, and it's completely different. You need hierarchy, you need different skill set as a CEO or COO. So you need to transform fast enough in order to keep up, in order to stay in your own role, for sure.
Absolutely.
And Sophia, so we are getting to the end of the episode, which has been honestly super inspiring for us. The last question that we always ask to our guests is, what gives you momentum? You kind of talked about what motivates you from the business side, but now we want to know, like, personally, what gives you momentum in this journey with AXMED?
So there's something I've always had from a very young age. I don't remember when it started, which was the desire to have an impact, to know that if I've been somewhere or if I've done something, it's better because I was there and I was able to improve it somehow. And that can mean different things in different environments, right? But to be impactful and to leave a mark and for the better, to make a positive difference. And certainly that has grown only even truer the more I've grown as a mother too, and as a, let's say, as I get older, still young, but as you get older, right, where you realize there's certain, for me, and this drives different people, different things, but for me, I get a lot of momentum from knowing that I look back and I can say, I was there, I made it better, and I was there and I was part of the solution. And I love it, for example, when I have to travel and sometimes be away of home, and my kid, my eldest, asks me, where are you going? Why are you going to Kenya for so many days? I'm like, well, I'm helping others get medicines and I'm making these better for others. So that purpose and that, because I was there and I could contribute and I give the best I have when I'm somewhere and when I'm involved in something, that's, I think, what keeps me ticking. And I think if ever that stops, or I feel, to the conversation we were just having before, I stop getting that momentum because I feel I'm not having that impact or I'm no longer making it better, then I think it's time for me to move on or to find something else to keep that momentum, Erika, and be able to keep making an impact.
So wonderful, Sophia. Thank you so much for being with us. Your journey is truly inspiring and very exciting, not only as a co-founder of AXMED, but also as a person managing so many things at the same time. I don't know, you probably need to write a book or, with all the advice.
I don't have time
especially for women.
to write a book.
And in the moment, while you're walking, while you're going to places, and just optimize that too. I'm sure you can do it if you want to. No, but really, really, I mean, we are really in all of you, because I think it's not common to meet a person that can actually fit all those, like, can realize all those dreams together at the same time. I think it is really an inspiration for many women, but not only, honestly. And we really love this episode. I have 1,000 questions more that I would love to ask, but for now, we wish you the best of luck, and we want to stay in touch for sure to follow all the success that AXMED and you will have. So thank you so much, Sophia.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Sophia. And whenever in the future you would like to reconnect, feel free to let us know. We will be happy to have you one more time. For any achievement you would like to share with us, for
Failures
anything.
too.
Failures, of course, they are even more precious than successes, right? So thank you. We wish you all the best, and yes, happy to have you again.
Likewise. Thank you for the invite and the time. Thank you both.